The Goat House is back with every single NFL trade candidate you need to know about for this offseason and where they could end up. We'll talk about all the landing spots, the value, and the best fit for every single one of these trade candidates. I'm excited. Let's break it down. Start with one of the big ones, Myles Garrett. I think there's a decent shot he could get traded. Obviously, right now, the Browns don't want to deal him. That could change over time. The financials is the biggest obstacle because they actually lose cap space by trading him, and they're already in a hole. So that creates some problems. They would need enough compensation back. They possibly can get 2 1s for him. Maybe that's the maximum. Maybe it's a round 1 plus a day 2 or plus 2 day 2s. So somewhere around that range. Favorite landing spots. I made a whole video with all the possible landing spots for Myles Garrett, but these are I narrowed it down in this video. Commanders and Chargers check a lot of boxes. They can afford him now. They can afford the extension in the future. There are enough of contenders that they would be appealing to him. They have the need. It makes sense as a fit. Maybe a little bit more so with the Commanders. Green Bay's really growing on me. Their only issue, they normally don't make splash trades. I think they're ready to do that, especially for a consistent pass rusher. Feels like they're really desperate for that. But their issue is future cap space. They're a little tight on being able to afford the big-time extension for Myles Garrett, but they have cap space this year, today. The Falcons, are they enough of a contender? That's their question. They're about to clear a lot of cap space with some easy moves, and they're looking for a big-time pass rush. I think they're appealing enough spot. The Bears, are they enough of a contender? They're a little more appealing now with the staff they have hired. The Bears aren't afraid, looking at the last few years, of trading picks away. They have 2 number 2s. They have an earlier round 1. For me, tough to pass on Myles Garrett. I want them to finally keep their draft picks and build through the draft because they have a lot of young pieces, but I would not be surprised if they were interested. And the Eagles, they're tight on future cap space, but they always try to find a way to make it work and just get better. So my favorite fit out of these teams would be the Commanders. So right now it feels like he stays with the Browns. A trade is a decent shot. The Commanders, Chargers check a lot of boxes. The Packers are really growing on me. They're up there for me, but the Commanders would be my favorite landing spot for Myles Garrett at this early stage. Another big name everyone's talking about recently, Cooper Kupp. The Rams seeking a trade, so they're looking to trade him away. They're also helping Kupp out by trying to find the right landing spot. He's 31. He's declining pretty noticeably, even though he's still solid. He can block for you. Durability concerns, so he doesn't hold a ton of value. I'd say a 5th round pick. Plus, he comes with a $20 million cap hit. No team's going to trade for that. So the Rams, if they want to trade him, are absolutely going to have to pay a portion of the salary. $7.5 million is the number I keep an eye on, around that range. So because the Rams are paying that, does it bump up the value? I think we're already doing that with the 5th round pick, but certainly there's a shot at a 4th round pick. I don't see it. So I look for those 2 things and finding the right landing spots. The Falcons and the Texans are in the same boat. They have coaches on the staff that have Rams background. So those are interesting teams. They're familiar with Cooper Kupp. Steelers looking for a slot receiver. The Commanders looking for a slot receiver. The Broncos slot receiver. Jags, Liam Cohen has a connection with Cooper Kupp, Rams background. They would have to move on from Christian Kirk, which is possible. We'll talk about him in this video, actually. Then I'd watch out for the Jags. A lot of talk about the Lions. People within the league thinking the Lions. There's a connection there. Brad Holmes, GM of the Lions, background with the Rams. I personally I'm not on board for that fit. Not that I'm completely against it. I feel like they would find a way for it to work, with Goff there and how talented that team is. But to me, Cooper Kupp is a slot receiver, and Amon-Ra St. Brown's maybe the best in football at that spot. And of course, these guys, could they move around a little bit? Of course, but there's other fits I like better, but of course the Lions it just sounds like it could happen. So I'd keep an eye on them. My favorite fit being the Falcons. I was thinking about going the Texans. They got to clear some space. The Falcons do as well, but the Falcons have easy ways to clear space. I like the Falcons having Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson. That's a team that's going to they use several receivers. They're not one of those teams that's going to go 2 receivers, get 90% of the snaps, and everyone else gets like just a handful of snaps. No, they're going to use several. They want to use several receivers out there throughout a game. So I think they definitely could use Kupp, and he won't be like a 90% snap guy, probably like 70 to 80%, and that's perfect for him where he is at his career. And I'd say I really watch out for the Jags if they move Kirk. And I played around on Twitter with the scenario. It would actually make somewhat sense if, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if the Rams traded Cooper Kupp to the Jags for Christian Kirk, maybe a pick involved, Kirk's a little bit more valuable because he's younger. That actually could make some sense. I know that we're going to talk about Christian Kirk in a little bit, but yeah, definitely a guy that feels like he will be traded this offseason, at least at this moment. Let's talk about some quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, we're all expecting him to either be traded or cut with a post-June 1st designation. I think a team would trade for him and be around $27 million cap hit. That's actually not a lot for a proven quarterback. It's coming out recently, where at least Kirk Cousins is saying injury affected him, actually arm injuries, so maybe that makes teams go, oh, all right, maybe he can get back on track here. Maybe it's just an excuse. We will see. But I makes sense that he kind of needs some more time to recover even from the Achilles. So the Falcons are just looking to trade him, just dump him, get rid of him. So he is a quarterback. He's got a little bit of value, but not a ton, since the Falcons are looking just to dump him. So I think a 6th-round pick makes some sense. Top landing spots, teams that could use two things: a starting quarterback, but a mentor of a quarterback if you're looking to bring in a young guy. We're going to see who's actually going to bring in the young guy, bring in the rookie, bring in a draft pick. But Titans, Browns, Raiders, Steelers, Giants, these teams all stand out the most. The Browns make sense by far as the best fit, in my opinion. Kevin Stefanski there, just Tommy Reese, it kind of fits their system, and he's familiar with Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota, with Minnesota as well. So they make the most sense. The obstacle here is the Browns need to clear a lot of space, though, for this to happen. That's the tricky part. I could totally see the Titans. I almost put the Titans as my favorite fit. They brought in the Chiefs assistant GM, Mike Borgonzi, as their GM. He's been in Kansas City for a while, so this could be a Alex Smith situation. Kirk Cousins could be his Alex Smith, and they bring in a rookie quarterback, let's say with the 1st overall pick, or maybe in a different round, and Cousins can mentor that guy. The Raiders could do the same thing if they draft another link to Shedeur Sanders. That's just an example. So I think those three are a little more likely than Steelers and Giants, but yeah, they're certainly possible as well. The Browns make the most sense as a fit, but there is an obstacle there. Again, watch out for the Titans, going to get, Mike Borgonzi going to get his Alex Smith maybe to mentor a young quarterback. Geno Smith is another quarterback to watch. There really hasn't been a ton of talk about that. There's really no word if the Seahawks, they're all in, they're rolling with Geno Smith this year, or they're interested in moving him out so they can find the quarterback of the future. But I could totally see it. He's got an expiring deal, $31 million cap hit. That's pretty decent for an experienced, decent quarterback, and you're not locked in long term. So the Seahawks would clear that space that they could use, and another team, it's pretty affordable. Of course, they have to have some cap space, but we see the same teams that need a quarterback. Right away, you got to say the Raiders make sense as the best fit. They kind of get a bridge quarterback, but he also can help them win now. Pete Carroll is with the Seahawks, so there's a connection there. I'm looking at the Raiders and the Titans for this one. Like I said, with Cousins, I'm mainly looking at several teams, but I'm mainly looking at the Browns and the Titans. Raiders and the Titans stand out the most here when it comes to Geno Smith. They could afford that $31 million cap hit, and they're not locked in for the future, of course. But really, the Pete Carroll connection makes a lot of sense here. But this would be an interesting one. And his value, probably a 4th-round pick, maybe a little more because he's currently a decent starting quarterback, but he's on an expiring deal. Seahawks need to clear space. It's just up in the air if they actually want to be in need of a quarterback right now. So a very intriguing one this offseason that I could see, but I can't guarantee that he'll be dealt. And here's a smaller one. I totally could see Will Levis getting dealt. He looked promising his first year when he got thrown in there last year. This past year, he was awful, just trying to make hero plays. And we saw a mix of everything in Kentucky. We're kind of seeing it now, but he has incredible arm talent. He has some flashes, tight window throws. He can hit them. He's a little, he's pretty athletic. He can avoid sacks. The Titans had a brutal offensive line. So he's a guy I honestly could see going elsewhere depending on the situation and sitting and actually becoming decent. So totally could see that. The Browns, if they just need a cheaper option, maybe they can't end up affording Kirk Cousins or whoever else, they trade for Will Levis. Jacksonville makes sense because they badly need a backup. Mac Jones wasn't it for the backup. Trevor Lawrence's injury concern. Liam Cohen coached Will Levis at Kentucky, actually, when Will Levis had his best year. So I think Cohen would be highly interested. The Rams, they need a quarterback of the future. Perfect opportunity to sit and learn behind Stafford. And the Vikings would be a Vikings move if they don't bring back Darnold. I thought Will Levis probably played his best game of the season, had his best game of the season against Minnesota, which is a pretty tricky defense for a young guy. So there's flashes in there. So I wanted to go favorite fit Jags because Liam Cohen, but They might not look at a quarterback. I really love the Rams fit. I think he would end up I think he would turn it around. If he went there, sat behind Stafford, learned from him and McVay, I totally could see him turning things around. So it's just one I kind of want to happen for just I'm rooting for a guy to turn around his career because he was a good prospect at Kentucky. So that one made a lot of sense to me. He'd be pretty cheap. Brian Callahan, he kind of threw Will Levis under the bus multiple times. Kind of secretly, you kind of can read between the lines and some of his quotes. So I think they'll be separating this year, but we will see. Deebo Samuel's one that's being talked about quite a bit dating back to during the season. He's complaining about not getting the ball enough. The Niners then force him the ball. He drops the ball a ton, so that didn't really seem great, but he's still valuable to Kyle Shanahan, the 49ers. But interesting one because the 49ers, if they were to trade him, they were going to have to make him a post-June 1st trade. Doesn't mean they have to wait to June 1st to actually trade him. They're already making Javon Hargrave a post-June 1st cut, so every team only has a couple of those moves. So otherwise, they would lose a ton of money. So there's an obstacle in there, but they would have to do that to trade him. And then some landing spots, the Texans, D'Amico Ryan's there. I know he's a defensive background, but they definitely could use another receiver. I think he would fit their play style. Steelers definitely would fit Arthur Smith play style, like tough, physical, underneath, small ball. Chargers, some similarities, hardball type ball. The Patriots, there was some rumors that the Patriots were interested in the recent past. I think Vrabel would be interested as well. And the Commanders, looking their team. I'm going to mention the Commanders, the Chargers, a lot of these teams a lot. They have cap space. They have needs at these positions that people are wanting to play. Players are wanting to play for those teams. Favorite fits, I couldn't pick one. I like two equally enough. The Texans. If Slowick was still there, I'd probably just go Texans and no one else. But Slowick is gone. How much they got to clear some cap space, but how much interest do they have? I think they would be interested in Deebo. And the Steelers, I mean, it would be a really good fit in Arthur Smith's scheme. They definitely need someone else with George Pickens. It really would fit Arthur Smith's offense there. So I like both those teams. I'll say right now, though, again, there's a different type of candidates on this video. There's guys that, yes, I think they'll be traded. I go, maybe there's a decent shot. I'm starting to lean towards probably not, just because the obstacle of he has to be a post-June 1st designation. Each team only gives a couple of those. The 49ers are using one on Hargrave already. I still think they like Deebo. The drama has kind of calmed down a little bit, but I guess one to keep an eye on. Right now, I'd say probably back to the Niners, but we'll watch. We'll watch for it. And I told you we would talk about Christian Kirk, who is a very, very intriguing trade candidate this offseason, in my opinion. I think there's a decent shot he gets dealt. I think what's keeping it from happening is, new staff in there. The new staff could revive. They could want to, Liam Cohen and company. They said Trevor Lawrence going to have a lot of pull. They could just decide, we love Kirk, we want to keep him. Where the last staff, they were going to trade him at the deadline. And there's some guys, in the front office still, same ownership, obviously, still on board with the organization. Do they still want to trade him like they were? And then he got injured. They couldn't trade him at the trade deadline. So he does have durability concerns. So maybe they move on from him and clear a little bit of space. I like the Commanders, a landing spot. They have cap space. You don't need a ton for Christian Kirk. They have a need at receiver. The Steelers, they're always in the market for a receiver. The Rams, I talked about the idea of trading Cooper Kupp for Christian Kirk, maybe a draft pick involved, pretty interesting, but the Rams could use another receiver. The Broncos, definitely looking for a slot receiver to pair with outside receiver Courtland Sutton. And the Cowboys, I could see pairing him with CeeDee Lamb. They won't be able to spend a ton of money, but he's not overly expensive, a little pricey. Went with two fits, and this is why I love this one. If Christian Kirk is on the block once again, like he was at the trade deadline, pretty realistic, but maybe Trevor Lawrence says, hey, Cohen, we're keeping him. That's realistic as well. But if he's on the trading block, I think there's going to be a battle here. People aren't talking about it. The Steelers and the Jaguars had a deal in place at the trade deadline for Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, if he didn't get injured, was going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. So obviously, they like Christian Kirk, and they still could. And he might even be cheaper now because he's coming off an injury. I think the value would be around round 4, which would be a pretty good, highest would be round 3. I'm not really seeing it. Lowest could be round 4. I like round 5. I think the 4th round pick could make some sense. But the Steelers had interest just a few months ago. Watch for that again. But the Commanders, we know they have a lot of cap space. They're looking to add players. They want more weapons, specifically receivers for Jaden Daniels to pair with Terry McLaurin. Their offense coordinator, who was a hit this year, Cliff Kingsbury, guess who he coached in Arizona? Christian Kirk. So there are two teams that are connected to Christian Kirk, and I think if he's on the block, I would guarantee both these teams would have some level of interest. So watch for those two teams if Kirk is available. A very intriguing one to watch this offseason. Commanders stud defensive lineman Jonathan Allen could be a guy that actually could be on the move this offseason. Dan Quinn doesn't really have ties to him. He just came in last year. I definitely could still like him, but they bring in Johnny Newton, and they're obviously pairing him with Deron Payne. And there's a couple guys they could add. I like the connection with Dan Quinn and Oso Digizua if he's available in free agency, if the Cowboys don't get him back, So they could easily replace him and just kind of create this big-time rotation. Expiring deal, so it makes sense to move on from him so they don't have to extend him. They could save some space, not that they need it. So it actually could make some sense. I'd say a round 3 pick, a third-round pick maximum. At first glance, it's like, this is a big-time defensive tackle. He's probably worth at least that. But expiring deal, did miss a chunk of the season due to injury. Maybe he wasn't as good this year. He's not the youngest guy, not that he's super old or anything. So I'd say a third-round pick. Maybe it ends up being a fourth. That would be a steal. I think a fourth and maybe a late pick as well. Some landing spots. The 49ers looking for defensive line, whether it's D-tackle or getting someone off the edge. Chargers. Definitely would love to have him at D-tackle. The Bears looking for interior. They're always open to trading. Panthers need to do a better job up front. Cardinals and Bengals could be interested in D-lineman as well. I love the 49ers as a fit. Robert Saleh back in there. This feels like Arik Armstead when he was in his prime for Saleh in the 49ers. He was a big-time player, bigger than everyone thinks. It feels like a similar player. Allen is better right now as long as he's healthy. The 49ers have some cap space. This would be a move, like if he would demand an extension, like I'm only going somewhere that extends me, then maybe not the Niners because they have cap space this year, but they're a little tight on the future and they have to worry about Purdy and some other things they have to add. They have to finally add offensive linemen, but they have to add a defensive end, defensive tackle, all these things, So if he's demanding an extension, maybe that makes the Niners less likely, but I could totally see this as, Allen let's play out my last year of my contract. I'm going to go to the Niners. That sounds awesome. It's a contender, and the Niners just roll with them this year, and they let him hit free agency next year. I totally could see that. So I love this fit with the scheme that they're doing there, the defense they're running there under Robert Saleh, and again, because the financials, the future, just kind of playing out the contract, it makes a lot of sense with San Francisco. So that's something that's not being talked about. I'd watch out for that one, though. Bryce Huff was just a big signing this past free agency by the Philadelphia Eagles, and it already feels like it was kind of a miss by them, right? They're not using him a ton. He's very underwhelming, but it kind of makes sense. You kind of go back to that last year with the Jets. Yes, he was super productive, but they couldn't have him on the field every down. He's a rotational guy, obvious passing down situations. He kind of fed off the other big-time players. He's not going to stop the run at a super high level. He's a high-end rotational pass rusher, and high-end's a little generous based off this year, but he could be that guy. So I think they already have other options, and I know Josh Sweat is a free agent as well, but they could be looking elsewhere, or they can give him a shot. Like, hey, they might be going, hey, he still has upside, he's still young, so we're going to lose Sweat in free agency, we'll keep Huff. It's definitely a possibility. But I say if he is traded, normally I'd say his value is more than a 5th round pick. But I'd say if he is on the block, it's just because the Eagles want to do away with that signing. So I think his value would drop a little bit. 5th round pick could be like a 5th and a 6th, 5th and a 7th. And he has like somewhat of a lengthier contract. So teams looking for a pass rusher: Falcons, 49ers, Cardinals, Titans, Panthers, Bucks. I could see any of them. All would be great fits with any of those teams. They're all looking for pass rushers. They all could afford them for the most part. Bucks got to do a little clearing, which they will. The Falcons have to clear, but I know they will. They have easy ways to clear. And there's two landing spots that, for obvious reasons, if you haven't figured them out yet, 2 landing spots that stand out big time. And we just talked about the 49ers being a landing spot for Jonathan Allen. Here's an edge rusher: Robert Saleh, Coach Bryce Huff with the Jets. He was a very solid pass rusher. Obviously could fit his scheme. And there'd be some interest there. And then Olbrich, who was the Jets defensive coordinator, the Falcons hired as their defensive coordinator. They badly need a pass rusher as well. So there's a connection with coaches. They're also big-time needs. I would watch for those two teams, unless the Eagles go, hey, we're going to give this guy more of a shot since we're losing Josh Sweat. Maybe they bring Sweat back. We'll see. But interesting, kind of a rare one because he just got signed to somewhat of a big contract this past offseason. He actually wouldn't come with a big salary the first year with a team acquiring him as well. So an interesting one to watch. Kyle Pitts, I mean, a guy that had so much hope, a lot of upside. I mean, he still has some upside, but been very, very underwhelming. There's really no talks right now about him being dealt, but man, the Falcons at this point, the way they're running with the new coaching staff from last year, and since putting Penix in, and the way they want to run things is they rather go with more actual receivers than Kyle Pitts. That's my take. He also dropped the ball a ton last year, kind of let them down in crucial moments. A couple of the games down the stretch, the Vikings game, he had a brutal one as well, and they were in that game for a bit. So this staff might just want to do away with him. And value's tough because I honestly could see some team just being like, God, I want to work with that guy because he's supposed to be so good. He would fit our scheme. Maybe they're saying a lot better. So maybe they trade a round 3, a third-round pick. I'd say around a 4th would make sense. We'll see if he ends up being a real trade candidate. Haven't really heard anything, but I totally could see it. Teams that need a tight end: Chargers, Colts, Rams, a sneaky one I could see. Broncos and Jets. I like the Chargers the most. It just feels like mainly a Greg Roman, with that offense, and they need a tight end on top of it. But I think Harbaugh would like him. Harbaugh's going to like the guys that were big time in college, big time recruits. Kyle Pitts, that guy. And they have a lot of spending money. He's got 1 year left on his deal. It's just over $10 million. So it's honestly a little pricey for the way he's been playing, but it's not overly pricey. So I would like the Chargers as a fit. The Chargers are a team that could be in on a lot of players this offseason, whether it's trade or free agency, because they have a lot of spending money and they're looking to turn that page and be more of a contender this year. So definitely a team to watch this offseason. Trey Hendrickson, the sack leader of this season, could potentially be on the block. I don't know if the Bengals necessarily want to get rid of him, but there were some trade talks before the year. Last year, he wanted a new deal. They didn't give it to him, but now he's going to need a new deal. He's an absolute stud. He's very important to the Bengals, but they switch defensive coordinators. They go with Al Golden. Are they going to find more of the athletic, younger pass rushers that fit his defense a little more? It's definitely possible. Maybe they just don't. Maybe they move on from him and they go, hey, we'll use this money and we'll sign T. Higgins and we'll add, this, that, a defensive tackle, pass rusher, or corner, all these things. And then sign long-term Jamar Chase. It's possible. My money is on the Bengals wanting him back and maybe him staying there, but he does need more money. He needs a new contract. His value would be a second-round pick, probably plus a late pick. You'd say sack leader, probably more valuable than that. He's a guy the league kind of just underrates, and he's a little older, not that it's a problem, and he needs a new deal. Probably only fits, half the teams in the league is not one for every single scheme, so valued probably, maybe even just a second round pick, but even though he's a phenomenal football player. Lions, definitely could see him fitting in opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. The Bears, he was under Dennis Allen when Dennis Allen was the defense coordinator with the Saints. Now he's the defense coordinator with the Bears, so pair him with Montez Sweat. Commanders could fit Dan Quinn's defense. The 49ers could be looking for a defensive end. The Packers could be looking for one, and the Falcons. So some of the similar teams that are looking for a defensive end there. Favorite fit, Lions. I wanted to put the Bears up here. At the same time, I didn't want to put the Bears up here. I wanted to put the Bears because the fit makes sense. They're probably looking for another defensive end. Dennis Allen connection. Boom. Bears love the trade for some reason. They have 2 second-round picks, so they can use one of those. Makes a lot of sense. For me to call it a favorite, I don't want the Bears to do. I want the Bears to build their team through the draft. That's how it's done. That's what I believe in for any team, but especially where the Bears are at. They have a second-year quarterback, a lot of young pieces on their team. Build through the draft rather than trading for an old veteran guy, but the fit does make sense. But I think the Lions makes a little bit more sense here, but my money is on probably back with the Bengals, unless they just don't really view him as a fit in the new defense. I guess that's certainly possible. Now, this would be a splash shock trade to a lot of people. DK Metcalf. Now, I will say right away, like I said down here, I think a trade's pretty unlikely. I'm not counting on it to happen, but his name's been out there. People are talking about watch out for DK, or is DK getting traded? It's floating around the rumors. Again, just rumors right now, so I included him in this video just because of that. I think his value would be like a late first-round pick. Multiple day twos. I think he's worth more than multiple day twos, but just a big-time outside receiver. I look at the Raiders with Pete Carroll there. The Packers looking for an outside receiver, and they would be interested in DK. The Chargers looking for an outside receiver to pair with their slot lad McConkey. Panthers and Commanders teams looking for a guy as well. Again, I think the trade's very unlikely. I got to put the Raiders as my favorite fit with Pete Carroll there. I think Pete would be highly interested in DK. DK would be highly interested in playing with him again. And I guess the reason people are talking about DK is he seemed a little unhappy last year. He definitely did, but too valuable to the Seahawks. Tyler Lockett, they got a decision with him. And I was going to include Tyler Lockett in this video because people are talking about him being a trade candidate. I don't think he's a trade candidate. I think he's going to be cut. And it's going to sound crazy at first, but it's the truth. I think there's actually a strong scenario where the Seahawks rather cut him than trade him, because no team, let me tell you why, no team is going to trade for him without the Seahawks paying a portion of the salary, because they don't want to pay $17 million with Tyler Lockett. They just don't, right? No one's going to do that. So they need the Seahawks to pay a portion of the salary. The Seahawks are already in a hole. They have a lot of ways to clear the space, though, so I'm not worried about them getting out of the hole. But if they pay a portion of Lockett's salary while they only get, because what are they going to get for Lockett? 6th round, 5th round maximum, and they have to pay a portion. They're not going to want to do that. So cut him, free all that money. So I don't think, so it just takes, I guess there's a small chance of it happening. I'm just not counting on it. So my point is, Lockett's going to be gone. You have JSN. You really want to get rid of DK. They don't want to do that. So I'm not counting on a trade here, but I threw him in the video because it's being talked about, and maybe he's a guy that maybe demands a trade. I'm not really counting on that, though. And another one that I'm going to say is very, very unlikely, but I keep hearing these. It's kind of just speculation, rumors right now, but Garrett Wilson wants out. He hasn't actually requested or demanded a trade. I just keep hearing these things. Like, people are saying he's going to request a trade. I'm not counting on that, but you just keep hearing it pop up. Maybe he's a little unhappy there, wants to go to a different spot, a different place, with just a little more, it's a little more successful, but they got a new staff in there. I really don't see him being traded. It's a star receiver in the making here. Could argue he's already a star. You maybe wish he's a little more consistent if we're nitpicking, but I mean, he's a stud receiver with the best football ahead of him. I think his value would be pretty high. I think it'd be like a round 1 pick plus a day 2. So you have to trade a lot. Teams would do that. Again, teams with cap space, teams that need a receiver, Commanders, Steelers, Chargers, Packers, Rams. I think these teams would do it. They wouldn't be afraid to do it. Rams are looking to replace Cooper Kupp. They're a team that's definitely not afraid to trade. Every time a good receiver is available via trade, the Steelers are like, yeah, we're off you this. They're kind of like the Ayuk situation. It'd be like that, where they'll be trying whatever it takes to get it done, and some when it comes to Garrett Wilson, because I think he's more valuable than Brandon Ayuk. But I do think if he were to demand a trade, I think he'd have to go somewhere with a good quarterback, more of a contender, because I don't think it would be about money of the future for him, future contract. So therefore, I would say the Chargers. I think Harbaugh would have a lot of interest in him. But I'm not counting on a trade, even though people bring his name up. So that's why I thought I would touch on it. So at the end of the season, Tyreek Hill said he was done with the Dolphins. He wants out. And at that point, everyone's like, oh, he's going to get traded. He's going to get traded then because he's requesting it. And then he calmed down a little bit. He's like, I let my emotions kind of get the best of me. But I don't know if that door is fully closed yet on that situation. I do think, I'm not counting on a trade, but I do think it's certainly possible. It wouldn't be as surprising as when he got traded from the Chiefs. I mean, that shocked me completely. So it's certainly possible. Maybe he's declining a little bit. I mean, he's still a star receiver. And the issue is, the future of his contract. But he said he might retire earlier than expected at the end of this contract. So I don't know if his value is at an all-time high right now. I'd say, multiple day 2 picks could make some sense. And if he were to get traded, it wouldn't be the Dolphins going, yeah, we don't want you anymore. It'd be because he wants out. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but that would mean he would want to go to a team that is very consistent in the passing game and that actually mainly is going to win playoff football, be in the playoffs and win in the playoffs. So Chargers keep popping up. They need a receiver. They're heading directions. Herbert would be appealing for Tyreek Hill. They have a lot of cap space. Commanders, same thing. Everyone wants to play with Jaden Daniels. They need a receiver, pair him with McLaurin. The Rams, moving on from Cooper Kupp. They, McVay, Stafford, they have space this year and in the future, appealing spot. Texans definitely need guys to pair up Nico Collins. They got to clear some space, but appealing spot. The Bengals, I'd say if they lose T. Higgins in free agency or if they tag trade, whatever that is, then Tyreek Hill actually could be a little bit cheaper, but totally different of an option, and that'd be appealing for Tyreek Hill to play with Joe Burrow in that Bengals passing offense. I love the Rams as a fit. I could see any of these teams, to be honest. Thought about the Commanders for sure. Really thought about them. Again, if we get to the point where T. Higgins is gone from the Bengals, and maybe them, but I love the Rams. I mean, they're going to move on from Cooper Kupp. They have Puka Nacua. They're going to value receiver. They need more guys to be more consistent. It's a high-powered passing attack, and it makes a lot of sense because The Rams, one, aren't afraid to trade. They don't really look ahead too much. That's kind of how it's rare that it works out that works out for teams when they do that, but it worked out when they won the Super Bowl. They don't look ahead. They're all about now, winning a Super Bowl now. This is probably Stafford's last rodeo because he thought about it for a little bit, retiring. This offseason didn't take too long for him to say he's coming back, but he's been banged up. He's got that guy's going through it, but he's still balling out at high levels. So they wouldn't be afraid to trade for him now, not worry about the future. And he, again, may retire a little earlier. He kind of hinted at a couple years ago than expected. So just ride it out. Just ride out these last couple of years and just go for it all this year. I think Tyreek Hill would be interested in that, and the Rams would be interested in that. They could afford him, and they're not a team that is afraid to say F those picks, even though they've been drafting very, very well recently. Last year when they actually had some decent amount of picks, they drafted very well. So we'll see. I totally can see that. It'd probably shock a lot of people. Even if I'm saying it, I'd probably shock me a little bit. So we're not really fully counting on it, but that's an interesting one to think about. Jair Alexander. The more I think about this, the more I think it's very possible he can be dealt. I was saying he's probably going to be a cut by the Packers, which is still possible because they can clear a lot of money if they make him a post-June 1st designation. He'd be available before then, but they could look to trade him. And this is at first glance, it was like, is a team going to trade for Alexander, who's very good, maybe not as good as he was a couple years ago, but has major durability concerns, and pay him a cap hit of over $17 million? No, I don't think a team's going to do that. But the Packers can help them by paying a portion of the salary. The Packers have a decent amount of cap space this year. They're a little tight in the future, but that doesn't play a factor when you're paying a portion of the salary this year. So they can actually help a team out. Maybe, with the Packers helping the team out, maybe a 4th-round pick, maybe a 5th if they're just trying to dump him. But he's still a solid corner. And they can get a trade done, if they do it that way. But if they don't pay any of the salary, I don't see how a trade gets done. Look for him to maybe be cut then, or maybe they keep him. We'll see. Maybe they rework the deal. But a lot of landing spots here. I think actually there's no teams interested if the Packers don't pay a portion, but I think teams will be lining up if they pay a portion of the salary because a lot of teams need corners, and I think he'd fit a lot of teams. Jags, Falcons right away stood out. Steelers pair him with Joey Porter Jr. The Rams aren't afraid to trade. They could use a corner. The Bills got to clear some space, but they traded for another Packer, Rasul Douglas, a couple years ago. That was actually last year, trade deadline, and then he was very solid for them, and he's a free agent now, so maybe they go with Alexander. Raiders could use a corner. Broncos could use another corner. Giants. So a lot of good scheme fits here, but the Falcons stood out the most. I mentioned the Falcons a little bit, quite a bit in this video. It just seems like a team that could be active. Just a lot of fits for them. But Jerry Gray was with the Green Bay Packers for a bit, a very respected defensive background. And he is the assistant coach and helps with defense with the Atlanta Falcons. And they definitely could use another corner to pair with A.J. Terrell. As good as A.J. Terrell is, the rest of the secondary was an absolute disaster last year. They couldn't stop anyone. So adding Alexander and Ulbrich is going to really value having a corner duo. Look what he had with the Jets with Sauce Gardner. DJ Reed is also available as a free agent, so another name to watch for the Falcons as well. But he's going to be more expensive, I think, than Alexander would be if they trade for Alexander and the Packers pay a portion. So it's the connections there with the Falcons. With Jerry Gray would make a lot of sense there. So interesting one. Will he? I don't think it's left alone. I think the Packers either rework his deal and keep him, cut him, or trade him. We will see. Interesting name to watch. Colts right tackle Braden Smith could be one to watch. I talked about him being a potential surprise cut, or he's very solid if he's on the field, so the Colts can just roll with them as well. He missed some games last year due to a personal matter, so see what the situation is on that. They may have young guys that could replace him there. So if traded, I'd say around a 4th-round pick, maybe a 3rd. Landing spots, teams that could use a right tackle: Patriots, Jets, Commanders, Niners, Texans, and Dolphins. The Patriots stood out the most. I did like the Jets and the Commanders as well. Those 3 teams, they all made. Niners make sense. Those teams stand out the most, but I think Vrabel and the Patriots could be interested in plugging him in at right tackle if he's available. No word on that, just kind of a sneaky one that maybe he could be available. Wouldn't really say to count on that, though, but yeah, team's desperate for offensive line help. You got a pretty solid veteran that does have some durability concerns and had a personal matter last year. So I guess it's depending on what's going on with him at his stage of his career. Texans guard Kenyon Green was actually a top draft pick a few years ago. It just hasn't worked out for him. And at the deadline last year, there was some serious talks with several teams that were interested in trading him for him. Isn't extremely valuable. So it'd be a late round pick, 6, maybe even a 7th, maybe a swap of picks. But I think there'll be some teams looking for a left guard that could be interested. The Ravens, the Patriots, the Commanders, Niners, Vikings, Bears. These are just some of many teams that could be looking for a guard. I think he plugs in more as a left guard. I love just scheme fit. Ravens just make a lot of sense. The Ravens aren't going to be able to spend big money on guys that are expensive, via trade or free agency. So this is kind of a Ravens-type move this offseason. Trade for a guy that I think he could revive his... Well, I guess he never had his career going, but maybe he can kind of actually live up to expectations for what he was as a prospect with the Ravens. They get the most out of guys. It's kind of random maybe, but I just really like that fit. So it's a smaller name here that could get dealt. I'd watch out for the Baltimore Ravens as a landing spot and maybe him kind of getting going in his career. Evan Neal, a former top prospect, has been underwhelming. He got replaced last year. Maybe the Giants just ship him off. And I take a look at the Giants. Guys aren't playing their best football for the Giants. And even guys that were playing good, they're playing their best football somewhere else. You got multiple guys. And again, I was saying it during the year. Guys play their worst version of football for the Giants. I was surprised they held on to their staff. So a guy that if you were to make a list on guys that need a change of scenery, I think Evan Neal could be at the top because this was a big-time prospect. He could be something. He needs to get out now. Maybe the Giants just ship him off for something cheap. Teams that could use a tackle, whether to help them out now or teams that could kind of bring in a guy, develop him, using him near future. But Titans, Patriots, Niners, Dolphins, Rams stand out. And the Titans stand out the most to me. They have a legendary offensive line coach known as the best in football today, and he's still kind of working on that Titans offensive line. It's a little bit of a work in progress, but Bill Callahan, I think he would like Evan Neal. Maybe he watched him as a prospect, and maybe he can get more out of him, and the Titans could just use anybody. So late round pick. And again, the Titans are rebuilding, sort of, so he can kind of be part of that. So a guy I would love to see, get a change of scenery. But a lot of trade candidates that we talked about just now. Let me know your thoughts, if your favorite fits, or if you think I missed on a trade candidate, let me know. We have all kinds of content on the channel covering cuts, trades, free agency. Those free agency videos, very informing. Check them out. Covering the draft as well. A lot more of those videos to come. So subscribe to notifications on. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.